I bought it as a limited company. I had all the first bank accounts and the money, and we had £1 million in the bank. Well, it's very difficult to tell whether I was set up or I don't know if you looked at the two hit jobs that the Guardian did on me. Well, they're interesting.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Nick Talks. This episode returning, I'm still amazing guest, is Catherine Blakelock. How you doing, Catherine?
Hello, good, thank you.
After our fantastic conversation the other day about the hopeful prosecution and suing of the grooming gang offenders so we can gain their assets and give that to their victims. At the beginning of that, I was joking about how you were the founder of the Brexit Party, which isn't a joke. But when I first heard that a couple of weeks ago, that here's a woman who said she set up the Brexit Party, my initial response was, no, you didn't. We all know it was Nigel Farage. How you can claim that's like saying you invented a light bulb. No, it wasn't you. You've got to talk about this story to us.
Well, it's very difficult to tell whether I was set up or whether events took place. And I can't claim that I was set up because I don't have the evidence to say that I was set up. But I have my suspicions. The gist of it was that I'd already bought names of parties, of companies, and it's a long, very painful story, but I had bought parties when I thought UKIP was failing and talked to varying people about setting another party up. And then there was an NEC meeting. I don't know if you know, but there was an NEC meeting where Nigel tried to come back to UKIP and get rid of Gerard Batten. Are you aware of that?
Not really.
Nobody really knows about it.
I remember UKIP falling apart at that time.
But Gerard Batten, this was before the European elections. So Gerard Batten and Nigel hated each other. I mean, they detested each other. And Nigel, there was this NEC meeting, and Nigel thought he would win the NEC, and he didn't, because Gerard basically said to all the NEC people, well, stay with me and you'll become MEPs. And so I already had the name, and I was talking to Nigel and bearing people. I'd been tangentially involved in Leave Means Leave. And earlier had dinner with Nigel. And I'd sort of risen very quickly through UKIP. I'd only in 2 years. In fact, Stuart Agnew wanted to put me forward as leader before Anne-Marie Waters, but I hadn't got the amount of time needed in that hustings at that point. And so I knew Nigel, and so I started the process to put it through, and the Electoral Commission, and I did a lot of work on it. Many of the people who eventually became MEPs, I brought into the party. So Lance Foreman was somebody that I knew personally. June Mummery, I mean, she knew Nigel, but I knew her from Norfolk. There was a guy called Toby who did all the vetting eventually, and I drove halfway across the country to interview him. There was a lady called Leslie Caton who eventually ended up working for the Brexit Party and doing all their marketing. And I brought in somebody called Mark Gallagher who brought in £1 million of free advertising for the Brexit Party. I introduced them to Nigel. The logo was my logo. I gave many logos to Nigel. Well, that was one of the logos, the one they still use to this day. I did all the work on it, etc. I had all the first bank accounts and the money, and we had £1 million in the bank. And I assumed there was an unwritten conversation, because I've been involved in business many times, and also I started a charity in Nepal, which we did healthcare, and I raised 100,000 for the Nepal earthquake in a week. I've been involved in organizations, big organizations and small organizations, including some that I've started, and partnerships as well. I had and so, there's always quite a lot of trust with these things. You generally, if I started an organization with you, there would be an assumption we wouldn't probably, especially if it's a not-for-profit. If it's a for-profit, you pin down a lot more generally with a partner, but with a not-for-profit, you assume that people would abide by their word. And I mean, my understanding was I was quite ambitious politically. I assumed that I would be an MEP, that I would be high up on the list. I talked about a board with Nigel, setting up a board. The understanding always was that I would pass the leadership to Nigel. That wasn't in question, but I held everything. I held the money, I held the shares, I had absolutely everything under my control. And so I guess probably from Nigel's point of view, my first mistake was that I looked at the polls, and you see, I'm an independent person. I don't think that I'm running Nigel or Nigel's running me. I'm running this thing, and then he's going to come and be leader, and we will work. But the polls were 12 and a half with UKIP. And I thought, well, this is just ridiculous. And so Carl Benjamin set up I set up a meeting with Carl Benjamin, who was close to Gerard. And we were talking about an alliance, what we could do as an alliance. Obviously, really that was nonsense, given that how Nigel was and how Gerard was. And when I went to speak to Gerard, who you probably know, I mean, he offered me a top spot the next day on the platform to be the number one MEP if I would bring all the money over to UKIP and bring everything over to UKIP and collapse the Brexit Party. And I said, no, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that to Nigel, and I wouldn't do that to you. I wouldn't have done that to Nigel. I actually considered as well I'd get assassinated by a Nigel person, by some fanatic. So, I could have done that. I could have destroyed Nigel at that point and just moved everything. And if that had worked, I might have become an MEP and shut Nigel out of the process. But so things went on, and then the first expose in the Guardian came out about me, and I call it an expose because it wasn't really an expose. It was a hit job. I don't know if you looked at the 2 hit jobs that the Guardian did on me. Well, they're interesting. So the first one, which to this day Femi uses and is an example of a racist, its headline was, Nigel Farage's mate thinks that testosterone causes violence in black men.
It does. It causes violence in all men, black men included.
Yeah, exactly. What they didn't mention in this entire article, and they'd taken it out of context of a whole blog that I had written about illegitimate children in Jamaica. My husband is Jamaican. It doesn't mention it. Now, it would have been easy for Nigel at that point to defend me, but he didn't. I got all the lawyers on me and basically saying, you've got to hand the leadership over immediately to Nigel now, which I did that morning. So they had documents ready for me in 20 minutes. Now, then we come on to the next thing, which is I'm actually now, well, I have tried to talk to the police recently since what they did with Rupert, because in my opinion, they breached a trust document and it's illegal. But I also now I for many years considered taking Nigel to court. but it would have been like the anti-bridging case. It would have cost me millions. It would have taken forever. I didn't have the funding. I didn't want to lose piles of money, etc. But for breach of contract, for loss of office, for defamation. But the most important, those are personal things, but the most important thing was that you heard all the story about the Brexit Party being a limited company. Went on and on. Well, that wasn't how I set it up. So I bought it as a limited company, like I bought the other names, because at that point, and now they've changed it somewhat, but at that point, you could buy a name with Companies House for about £10. Whereas if you set up a not for profit, it cost 100. So, I was just buying arbitrary names, and I didn't want to spend £500 buying arbitrary names when I could spend 25. So I bought it as a for share, and then realized that I needed it as a not for profit. My aim was always to set it up as a not for profit. And so there was a discussion with Nigel's lawyers, and he has some very powerful lawyers behind him, and actually with Tice and with a few other people about how to change this. And Tice and some other people I asked said, you just swap the names over and you buy another, because you can't change the memorandum. You just swap the names over. You make it into a not-for-profit. But one of Nigel's lawyers, who is super bright, said, oh, no, let's make a trust document. We'll put a trust document underneath. So I gave my shares to the trust, and I was a 50% trustee. That trust document disappeared into thin air, turning it back into a for-profit. And Private Eye investigated it twice, and we've never found where that trust document went. They basically got rid of that, and that made Nigel have all the power again and turn it back into a for-profit. They're still jigging around with Companies House right now. They've got another new party, another new company they've set up, and then they've swapped the names, not the Reform 2025 party, another one called Reform UK Party Limited. And then 2 weeks ago, they swapped the Reform 2025 or Reform 2024, I think 2025, with the Reform UK Party Limited. So there's a Reform Party UK, there's a Reform Party Limited. I mean, there's 3 different reform parties now, and we're like, why are you swapping these names? What are you doing? Why? And but the history of me with them and companies is that they mess about with them. They do all sorts of stuff, and they anyway. And then the Guardian released another expose about my anti-Islamic, Islamophobic quotes. Things like nothing really serious, nothing like nothing awful, nothing like I'd like to run over Gina Miller or something, nothing like that. Islam is incompatible with Western democracy. I want my country back. This looks like Turkey. I've just seen a drug dealer in front of me. Those sort of things. And it's how they got hold of those, because those have been deleted. Who had them? Where did they come from? Anyway, they then came after my shares, and they did it in an extremely unpleasant way. I mean, I ended up having to call my own solicitor, and I had to call a barrister over Easter holidays to get an opinion. And there was relentless harassment to destroy me and get rid of my share, get me to sign. And now, if I'd known Robin and other people, I was very isolated because I couldn't talk to UKIP, because UKIP people, Gerard said to me, and I'm speaking to Gerard again, but Gerard said to me at the time, you don't know Nigel. And he was right. And these people who vote for Nigel don't know Nigel.
Yeah. He's a brand now. He's a brand.
Yeah.
Yeah. He is what he wants us to think he is. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I've no idea. Um, but so it's true then. You set up the Brexit Party.
Yeah, that's a long story, sorry, but
No, 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 no. It was interesting.
there's a lot of shenanigans and a lot of really unpleasant things and a lot of legal things that were really wrong. And they destroyed me. I mean, that was the aim of the exercise. They did to you what they wanted. They did, as they did with Anne-Marie Waters. They eliminated me. They completely eliminated me from the political space.
Wow.
And I mean, I've never been treated like that in my life, ever. Never. Um, and there were false promises, etc. My solicitor was telling me, do not sign these shares, do not do it, do not do it. And they wore me down. I mean, there was a point where what's the point? And I basically went silent for I went silent for, I mean, I did one or two other things. I was one of the first people on Hearts of Oak with Robertson and Carl Benjamin. I was the speaker on that at the very launch, and I did a few things with Robin, but effectively I was out of politics. And even up to last general election, I was standing for the English Democrats in Great Yarmouth, which I'd been promised, which was the constituency I'd stood for before. And I said, Rupert went to Nigel and said, Catherine's standing, this is ridiculous. And then Nigel said, don't talk to her. And Rupert phones me up. And I said, don't vote for me, vote for Rupert. And that's how I got to know Rupert, way before he got chucked out. And wow, I mean, events, how they played out. And Rupert has inspired me to have some aim again, to do something like the halal thing and to keep fighting, because I think that that Nigel is going to take us into something awful, some type of WEF, maybe lower taxes, but he won't care about any totalitarian rules. He won't care. You saw what he did over COVID, over lockdowns, the way he's treated people all the way through. I mean, going back to the grooming gangs, he knew about it from the beginning. He's proud of having destroyed Nick Griffin and the BNP. He's proud of having destroyed Tommy Robinson and the EDL. He's proud of never talking about Islam or grooming gangs. He's proud of it. He deliberately stopped that happening, and he, in my opinion, is blocking the space on the right. God knows who Zia Youssef is. How that man managed to get control for so little money of the same shares that were my shares.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have no involvement now in the Brexit Party, either personally.
I'll tell you something else. Well, yeah, no, I have nothing to do, because of course there were loads of people that Reform would never have in. I mean, Carl Benjamin, Connor, Tomlinson, all these people who were they were eliminated. A lot of them applied. They were just, these are the best people, some of the best people we've got. And the list of people who are not allowed in to Reform is extraordinarily long. You probably wouldn't be allowed in. Well, you were, but whether you would stand as a parliamentary candidate, did you stand as a parliamentary candidate for them?
No, I joined it. I joined at Christmas and I left a few days ago.
Yes, I saw you had left. So, but people like Robinson, Anne-Marie Waters, myself, Carl Benjamin, Stephen Wolfe, all the ex-MEPs, etc., the good ones. You saw what he did to Godfrey Bloom. I mean, Godfrey Bloom was his best man. Have you know Godfrey Bloom?
I've heard the name, yeah.
Well, Godfrey Bloom was the best. Google him. Look at his speeches. He was the best MEP that ever existed. The press started to ask for Godfrey Bloom, like they started to ask for Rupert.
Right, yeah.
Okay, he was his best man, and they destroyed him, chucked him out. So it's constant.
Yeah.
I've got other evidence that you've heard of common purpose.
Yeah.
People who were presenting evidence to Nigel about common purpose 15 to 20 years ago were destroyed, not allowed to be in UKIP, and he destroyed the Plymouth branch.
Mm.
They were trying to expose what was going on, and the response was to destroy them. And that's been general. So what you have is this new generation all the time, and I've talked about this. Rupert Lowe and Ben Habib will have been told right at the beginning that I'm a terrible person, don't talk to her. I'm told there's the next generation before that Stephen Wolf is a terrible person. Don't talk to him. Those people, and it will go on and on and on like that. And now we've got a new generation, the new conservative group. So, yeah, but dead bodies on the way or something else of people who are passionate, who would give their lives for our country.
You paint a very bleak picture of Farage and the dealings that have happened. It's a very dark picture. Historically, it makes perfect sense, as in, we have many leaders, many kings, many emperors who act like this. That's how you get to the top sometimes, by stabbing all your rivals in the back. We've seen it throughout history. I don't know where reform go. I just know that I left because I finally realised that they're not an anti-immigration party. They are a let's make as much money as we can party, and that needs migrants. Maybe not illegal migrants, maybe not people crossing on the boats. I'm sure they want to stop that, but migration in general, bring them all here because it's great for business, low wage economy. We don't want to. And that, when I came to that conclusion over some comments, David Bull, Richard Tice, and Nigel Farage, all three of them made in a 10-day period. And I went, they can't tell me any louder than this. If I don't want to listen, that's my fault. And that's when I went, I can't be a part of this anymore now.
Well, and what they've done to local branches is terrible. The good people that they've Zia Yusuf has just chucked out. And the type of totalitarian sort of lack of free speech, Gestapo type stuff that goes on inside.
Yeah, no, absolutely crazy. But do you know what? At this moment in time, they're here to stay. They're doing well in the polls. They even after this conversation, I would vote for them more than I would vote for Tories and Labour. I want to see them destroyed. But I don't think Reform UK is the answer now. I think Reform UK is the next step on the journey to the answer we're going to get and the people we need.
I think we will have something before the next election. I think that the political scene has changed. People are really angry. And I think just see the progress that Rupert has made already. And I've been looking for that person for a long time. And I always assumed they'd be a lot younger. I didn't think that they would be that age. I didn't think they would be that class. But suddenly he appeared.
Yeah, cometh the hour, cometh the man.
He's got a backbone. He's got a backbone like Geert Wilders and Marine Le Pen and Trump. He's got that type of, I am not going to be intimidated by you. I'm not going to say what you like.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we need, isn't it?
And it takes great guts to do that. And he's also got amazing organizational skills. I mean, how he just churns this stuff out and does all these things, and he's running his own business, and he's doing all this stuff in Great Yarmouth.
It's called having a great team, isn't it? And having experience of knowing how to set up a great team and knowing the people you're going to get in already. So he was already 2 steps ahead of most MPs. I'm sure his team on the ground are the same people who are working for his businesses and stuff like that. He understands to delegate. He understands what makes a good person. So he's already ahead of the game on that. Catherine, thank you so much for that discussion. Quite dark in places, but as we all know, politics is a dirty business. Always has been, always will be a dirty business to some extent. We just need to find people who are better, who want to put the country first, who are not perfect, because no one's perfect. We've all got flaws, but all I'm looking for are people who want to put the country first. and they're very far and few between.
And not be in it for money. I mean, there's so many people are just in it for influencers, or how many, people are making a lot of money out of it as well.
Well, someone is, Catherine, because you don't see the taxes we're paying. Someone's making money somewhere down the line.
But like people who, I mean, the numbers that people make on YouTube are quite extraordinary for the big winners.
Oh yeah. Yeah, if you've got a couple of million followers on YouTube, you're earning a couple of million a year. And that's just, yeah, absolutely. But YouTube is a tool we're using to, I know they're still a little bit restrictive, but social media is what will change the world, because you can't control what we say anymore. They're trying, and they're going to lock more of us up, but it's a fool's errand if they think they can control social media and the internet. It's like the printing press 400 years ago. It's a game changer.
Yeah, no, and Elon Musk, thank you very much for buying it.
No, absolutely. When he bought it, I knew Twitter would be better, because I was banned off Twitter at that point. I was kicked off. I had a lifetime ban, no warning,
For what?
for criticizing a Ukrainian refugee who came to this country and stole the husband of the family she went to live with. And I referred to her as an ungrateful whore. That was it. And lifetime ban. And she was an ungrateful whore. They put her up, and she stole the husband of two kids and ran away with him. But then he bought it. I came back, and Twitter has been a godsend. I didn't realize how much power social media had until he bought Twitter and freed it. And then I realized, oh, this is massive, this change.
The other thing that's extraordinary, because I mean, I'm interested in business, but we said, oh, he overpaid like hundreds of times and whatever, and he got rid of all these staff. But he's been very inventive about how to make money. He recognized that Twitter, the old Twitter, was just useless at making money. I mean, the idea that why should sort of verified people, whoever they are, be able to get all the perks of getting their tweets promoted and all the rest of it?
That's because they were the people the elite wanted us to listen to in the first place.
And now you can I thought at the time, this is a terrible idea, how you buy this, but now it's brilliant, because my halal campaign has just bought one this morning, because I want it to be able to do things properly on Twitter.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. He's not a stupid man. Doesn't mean everything he does is right or everything he does will work out, but he's not a stupid man, and he has ideas, and he's proved Twitter can work. Twitter's better than it was.
Going back to Nigel and Rupert Lowe, I mean, I doubt if Rupert Lowe got much credit for me and him being on a platform together, because Rupert, like me, is an independent. He's got a free spirit. Don't control us. He went off and thought it was perfectly reasonable. I'm trying to get elected. I will talk to Catherine. And so that was his first black mark. And then, of course, there was the Elon stuff. And that was just...
Oh, that's where that rift happened. It was Elon's.
What they did to Rupert was just awful. And I recognise that.
Yeah, Catherine, there can be no dissent. There can be no dissent. I'm the emperor. There can be no dissent. And they got stabbed in the back.
Yeah, but it's done something very different from what Nigel has expected. And I think he's made a critical error. I know it looks great at the moment, but they've dropped 3,000 members in the last 2 weeks. And, in Germany and in other places, we've seen political parties just rise from like phoenixes. And the mood is so volatile and so angry that a phoenix can rise.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. And got my fingers crossed it starts happening, because we definitely need it. Catherine, thank you so much for coming back on my podcast. And then let's do this again in a couple of weeks. And let's talk about your halal project.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. Bye-bye.